everyone. Thank you for joining us today. The title of the talk is "As Little Children," and from time to time, this theme comes around. What does this mean to be as little children? In the New Testament is what I'm referring to at the start here. Is there's a parable in the New Testament, that the children wanted to come to play, to be with Jesus. Right? The Christ, the point where the divine becomes human. Right? And the children wanted to be with him, but his handlers were pushing them away. You'll annoy him. Don't go there. He's a busy man. This is the very Son of God here. And he stopped them and he rebuked them. And he said, "Let them come to me. Let the little children come to me, because unless one comes to me as a little child, they won't see the kingdom. They won't see the kingdom. They can't enter the kingdom. We must enter as little children." And of course that, over the years, theologians and preachers and historians and everybody else trying to analyze this, and what does it mean? What does it mean? Is there an idiom involved? Is it the use of words that mean something else? So, for example, if we go back to the Old Testament, there's a passage in there that's very famous that says, "And the children shall lead, and the children shall lead." And of course, does that mean that governments are going to be turned over to little children? And there, the use of the word children is more of meaning those who are simple, those who are pure of heart, like a child, to be as a child. Not people who are caught up into egoism or greed or power and control and all those things, but the day will come that the pure of heart, the simple, right? Not very complicated, the simple, the loving, the joyful will lead. So in the New Testament, we're given this parable then. If we take it to apply to us, we're given the parable that says, if we wish to enter the kingdom, we'll talk just briefly about what the kingdom is, then we must do it as little children. Now, there's kind of a parallel passage or a passage that we can tie to it that comes from the Gospel of Thomas. Now, the Gospel of Thomas is not one of the usual Gospels that we read. It's a Gnostic Gospel. It was found sometime after. It was one of the Gospels that was found. The scrolls were found in mason jars in a cave, not to be confused with the Dead Sea Scrolls. They're kind of different things. But the Gnostic Gospel of Thomas, there's a passage in there where Thomas asked Jesus, and he says, you're always talking about the kingdom. Where is the kingdom? And the response is, the kingdom is all around us, but men do not see it. Humanity does not see it. People do not see it. The kingdom is all around us, but human beings do not see it. So what is this kingdom? First, let's talk about what is this kingdom. And then where we want to go today is, perhaps it is the qualities of children, the way that they look at the world, the way that they experience the world, the way that they immerse themselves into the world. Perhaps that is the reason that adults do not see the kingdom that is all around. So the kingdom that Jesus speaks of as we go through the New Testament, to me, what that kingdom is that is the very experience of the presence and the activity of God, of the divine, or as he called it, the Father. Love is all around us, you see. Miracles are all around. I love this morning that on the conference bridge as we were trying to get started, Jeannie was talking about the miracles, Are we paying attention to the miracles? Are we in awe of the magnificence of life? Do we feel the sublime in the ordinary? These are the things that we're talking about. And I think that the kingdom, the presence and the activity and the availability of the personal experience in that the conscious realization that we are experiencing the presence and the activity of God. This is the kingdom. This is the kingdom. Jesus told us, he said, go within. Go within. You see, the kingdom is within. It is not out there. It is something we have to find in here. We find it in here. And then when we find it in here, we can see it out there. This is nothing new. We've been told for a long time that which we see out there is a projection of that which exists in here. Right? What we are looking at, we are looking with. And this kind of came from what stirred this up for me is on Wednesday night in our Zoom group, we were reading a chapter in Steve Taylor's book On the Leap, and he was talking about the spirituality of children. And it just reminded me, now there's different ideas that are expressed in the book, and one of them is the consideration that little children come into the world, infants come into the world, and they are naturally in the presence. They are naturally in the moment. They are naturally in the experience of the presence of the divine. But then something happens. We kind of indoctrinate them. We indoctrinate them to the world. We send them to school. We teach them order. We teach them discipline. We teach them to remember facts and all these kind of things. And it seems as an observer looking at that, that some of that magic of just the preschoolers before they go off to school, that magic of them just playing in the moment, just being in the moment, just creating their own entertainment, just from imagination, from creativity. I saw an article last week, and it said the cure for isolation is creativity. The cure for isolation is creativity. We have an opportunity here as this world, the world that we knew, that we all grew up in, it's gone. It's changed. It's never going to be like that again. But we have time now for creativity. We have time to focus on the things that are important. So as the children grow, as they grow out of childhood, as they grow into school age, as they grow into adolescence, as they grow into college-age children, as they go into the service, as they go into work, as they become their roles in society, as they become mom and dad themselves and raise their own little children, it's as if that magical moments, those magical moments of childhood fade, the memories fade. But then as we grow spiritually, you see, as we begin to realize that we are more than our jobs, and we are more than our roles and all of those things, we start to wonder what's important in life. And we start to actually re-experience or reclaim some of those same qualities. The magic of the moment, the beauty of the moment. What is important to us now? We're finding this in our society over and over. Everybody says, well, maybe what's happening, maybe what's going on in the world is helping us to get back to what is really important. What is really important in life? It's not the money. Many, many people have seen money come and money go, It's not the institutions or the organizations we have built up. many of those will disappear and they will fail. I remember years ago I was officiating a graveside service for someone in Wilmington who had passed, and as we were leaving the cemetery, Lori was driving, we were leaving the cemetery, and we were going out kind of a circle. We had to go around the edge of the perimeter of the cemetery to find the exit, and there were for sale signs over these plots in an exclusive section of the cemetery, and they had little fences around them, and they had a for sale sign, and it was something to the effect that, you know, you've worked hard your whole life, you deserve this special place to be buried. You know, a week or so ago, I got my camera out and I went down to the local historical cemetery here to take some photographs, and it just always amazes me when I do that. You know, at the variation in the monuments, the stones that are there. You know, some are huge, big stones. You know, some are just tiny little plaques of a stone that are just kind of stuck in the ground, and everything in between. The cemetery has been there, you know, for a couple hundred years, so some of the stones have fallen over and cracked. Perhaps by the weather, perhaps by vandals. And we look at all that, and you can say, you know, it seems like even in death, there's a competitiveness of human nature. And people want their loved one to have the biggest stone or the most expensive stone. And is that what's really important? You know, I realize that that's an expression of love, it's an expression of respect, and people are trying to grieve and to express their love in what they believe is an appropriate way, and it is an appropriate way for them. But step back and take a big look, or a long look. I saw something this morning. It said the sun, our sun, the star that we are closest to, is about halfway through its life cycle. It's 4.5 billion years old, they think, and they expect it to last another 4.5 billion years. You know, and I always chuckle when I see that, because some of us are going to read it and say, well, what are we going to do then? we ain't going to have to worry about that. We're not the ones that are going to be here if anybody is, you know. 4.5 billion years ago and 4.5 billion years into the future, the very earth, the continents that we are standing on, are not going to be here. See, the cemeteries with all of their big monuments, they're not going to be here. You know, the continental plates that we're standing on will go back to the core of the earth, and everything will be melted. New ones will emerge. So we have to kind of recognize, I think, and this time that we're going through, this miracle that we are going through, is forcing us, I think, to get back to focusing on what is really important here. What is really important? Are we giving our time and our attention to that which is truly important? And for many, the distractions that we have faced in our lives have gone away. You know, they're not there. Folks can't go to work. So what does this mean to be like the little children? And how does that help us to get closer to that which is truly important, truly important. You know. So if we look at the children, if we look at what it means to be a child, and if we look at the way that the children, without the artificial structures that are imposed upon them, you know, of schools. You know, I think a lot of parents are struggling now, excuse me, to see how difficult it is to teach a curriculum to the children, especially at home, especially with their parents who they're not used to having in that role. But I think we have to go back and realize that that's not necessarily the natural way that children learn. That's not necessarily how children learn, in structure and in order, and according to a clock, and 45 minutes for this subject and 45 minutes for that. I was thinking this morning, as I was letting the thoughts kind of flow through, of many years ago when Lori and I taught Sunday school up in Durham. And the Religious Science International had a curriculum, and they had everything laid out, and you're supposed to do this for 10 minutes, you're supposed to do that for 10 minutes, and then you're supposed to have an activity, you were supposed to color for 10 minutes, and then you're supposed to clean up for 10 minutes or whatever. But it was very organized, and it was very structured, and it was, it was laid out exactly the way that it was to be done. The kids didn't want to do that. That wasn't their thing, It struck me funny because I was used to working in business, and everything was PowerPoint presentation. Because this is actually probably before PowerPoint. We used to actually, they look like ransom notes for newspaper headlines. We had a clear plastic slide, and they would cut out words and letters and kind of glue them to the slide, and those are our overhead charts back in the day, But I was used to making presentations in public, and we would have the little pointer pens, and we would go through our spiel and try that with the kids, They get bored very easily. So my point is that the way that things are organized, the way that adults organized the learning experience, was not natural to the children. It was an artificial and imposed structure on them. And what we learned, or at least what I learned, is find out what the kids want to know. Find out what the kids want to know. And work your lesson into that. And I know you've heard me say this before, tell this story before, but a little guy come, and some weeks we didn't have any children show up for Sunday school, some weeks we had one, some weeks we had 5 or 6, you just never knew. And this one week, this little guy comes in, I think he was about 4, maybe 5 years old, and cute as a button, and his parents had taken him to the science store. I can't remember the exact name, that might have been it though, the science store at the mall, And they got him a little explorer's kit, and it had a pith helmet, and it had a magnifying glass, and it had a specimen jar, and it had a net, And the idea was that the little one was supposed to go out and catch things and put them in the jar and look at them with the microscope and then let them go. And that's what he had when he came in, And I had this lesson that was all laid out. We were supposed to talk about this for 10 minutes. We were supposed to do that for 10 minutes. He didn't want any of that. He wanted to play with his microscope and his helmet and his net. He was the only kid that showed up that day. So what I did was I put the lesson to the side, and we went out into the neighborhood, and there were vacant lots in the neighborhood, and we went for a little walk, and we went into the vacant lots, and we discovered the ants, and we discovered the insects, and we talked about how perfectly ordered everything was, and how God had put everything there for a purpose, and all these things. So the lesson was adopted to his interest, to what he wanted to do. Children are naturally curious. Someone posted a meme on Facebook this week that said little children, preschool children, ask between 300 and 400 questions a day. And I wrote back, why? Why? Don't you just love when they just get into the why stage? Why? Why is that? They are naturally curious. And if we are to enter the kingdom, if we are to experience the love and the presence and the activity of God around us, I think we must be curious too. And I think we kind of get taught as we grow up to lose our curiosity. It's not, don't waste time asking questions just because you want to know. Only ask those questions that are relevant to what it is that you want to do. You know, what are you trying to do right now? What's important? You know, and I love Forrest Gump. I love the character Forrest Gump and the author who wrote that, because there's just so many sarcastic barbs at society in there. You know. And Forrest Gump apparently had no curiosity whatsoever. He just did whatever somebody in authority told him. He was the perfect soldier, you know, because whatever they told him to do, he did. You know, you take your rifle apart, put your rifle back together. Yes, sir, and he did it. You know, Mama told him to do something, he did it. Lieutenant Dan told him to do something, and he did it. And he just had absolutely, apparently, no curiosity of his own. He just went through life doing exactly what he was told, and of course, he became a very wealthy person because of that. See, but we're not supposed to be like that. We're supposed to be curious. I want you to think for a moment about desire, or appetite, perhaps, or motivation. We come into this world and we have certain appetites, food, water, things like that. We have certain motivations and certain desires, and those desires cause us to engage in a behavior that is good for our growth. In the opening treatment, you know, what came to mind was a baby coming into this world, being born into this world. I worked on an ambulance back in the 70s, and we were taught emergency delivery, what you know, how to deliver a child in the field if you had to. And one of the things that they taught us was as soon as a child is born, hand it to the mother to feed, because that would help her to pass the placenta. Now here's this infant that is just a few minutes old, and as soon as she puts it to her breast, it knows exactly what to do. Divine love has brought this child into the world with the instinct and the appetite to cause it to do that which is going to lead it to grow. Our natural curiosity, our desire to know, leads us to explore more of God. Who am I? Why am I here? Where am I going? So the children want to know. They want to question to the void. The first answer is nowhere near the final answer, you know. They're going to keep asking until they finally get told, well, I don't know, you know, I don't know. Then they find something else, and then they find something else, and then they find something else. They're always like this little guy with his magnifying glass, you know, in his butterfly net. They're always looking for something to explore. Wendy started us off this morning with the quote by Winston Churchill that said, it's not a time of comfort and ease, but it's a time to dare and to endure. And I changed that a little bit. What I heard, what happened in my head was, it is a time for adventure. It is a time for adventure. It is a time to explore. The children can explore, and they can play, and they can find a way to express their joyfulness in almost any situation. You know, there was a show on not too long ago about the children who grew up in the concentration camps in Europe in the Second World War. And they were talking about running around and playing tag and playing hide and seek in the midst of a prison camp, in the midst of death and destruction. The children found a way to play. So there's this natural desire for playfulness, you see, curiosity and playfulness, you know. instead of work and drudgery. I often chuckle because the definition of work is energy that's expended for a purpose. That's kind of the definition of work that I use. And if you look at that, then you say, well, what's the definition of play? And the definition of play might be energy that's expended for no purpose. Not to specifically accomplish anything. And if you watch the children come in after they play, my God, they've been working. They're dirty, they're sweaty, they're smelly, they're exhausted. Remember when the little ones would come in and they would be so tired, they would just kind of sit down and then lean over and fall asleep on the floor. They gave everything they had to what they were doing. They were in the moment and they gave everything they had to what they were doing. So can we be curious? Can we be playful? Can we be joyful? Can we be in awe of the magnificence? While we are here, this time that we are spending together, in an hour, we spent an hour together. If you were on the equator, you would move 1,000 miles, right? The Earth is about 25,000 miles around, and it takes 24 hours to go completely around once. So if you're on the equator, you're moving at almost 1,000 miles an hour. The planet is moving through space around the sun. The sun is moving in space through the galaxy. The galaxy is moving in space through the universe. And we don't know what happens after that, We don't know what happens. Are there multiverses? Is the universe moving within something? I love when they talk about the universe is expanding. Into what? Into what? What is it expanding into? If the universe is all there is, how can all there is be increasing all the time? Wonder, curiosity, awe. Can we go out at night and look at the stars? We went a couple months ago. The local astronomy club had a stargazing night up at one of the national parks not too far from here, and our oldest grandson went with me. And we sat there for a while until our eyes got accustomed to the dark. And then a gentleman who ran a planetarium somewhere came out and he had a little green laser pen and he would point it up in the sky and say, see that over there? And he would tell us how old it was and all the different little facts. And you get a sense, when you're in an environment like that, you get a sense of just how big is this creation that we are part of. And I think we lose sight of that when we have our heads down and we are constantly working, we're constantly planning, we're constantly thinking about what we're going to do next. See? So can we take time to experience the awe? What are you doing when you experience the awe? Is it standing on the beach? Is it being out on a starry night? Is it sitting in the woods? Down where we used to live in Wilmington, there was a little park on the river, and I would quite often go there on Saturdays, and I would just sit at the bench and I would read through my various books and allow ideas to kind of come for the Sunday talks. And there was a live oak tree there in that park, and that live oak tree was so big that I envisioned it must be 400 years old. I don't know that for a fact, but that's the story I made up. And you could look right past that tree out to the river, Cape Fear River. And I wondered if that tree could talk, what it would share, what had it seen in its lifetime, in those 400 years. And I started to feel the awe. I started to feel the wonder. I started to feel connected to the enormity of life and the universe. What does that for you? What does that for you? Creativity creativity is another quality of the children, you know. You give them a cardboard box, you give them a box of crayons, you give them some paper, you give them some sidewalk chalk, and turn them loose. And in very little time, they're creating something. They're drawing pictures, or they're making spaceships, or they're building they're building forts, you know. They're building ships to sail across the sea. Rather than trying to impose upon them the structure of something they ought to do, their little minds run free, and they begin to create, and they begin to explore, and they'll do this for hours and hours and hours. I think that getting in touch with our creativity gives us that permission to be playful, to be joyful, you know. And almost always what they're doing is for no other purpose than for fun, for joy, to be in the moment, you know. When our kids were very, very little, when they were preschoolers, you know, and I would come home from work, and they had a little kind of ritual, you know, of things that they would do, and they would go and get their toys, and they would come out, and I'm talking little, you know, I'm talking 3 years old, 4 years old. They would get some little toys and little dolls and little things, and they would come out and just make up entire stories that would last until supper was ready, and then sometimes resume after supper, you know. And they would just have their little characters, and they would make up stories about what this little character was doing, what that little character was doing. But they were in the moment. They were in that moment. Right? They were into the creativity. They were into the joy. They were into the story. I don't even know that it was so much of a story for them as it was. They were just in it. They were just in the moment. So as adults, we have to go and we have to learn mindfulness. We have to teach ourselves to be mindful. And as a child, we are spontaneously mindful. Curiosity. Why are we here? Where are we going? Who am I? Yeah. Amazement, awe, wonder, creativity, being in the moment. So these are the things that I'm talking about, the qualities of childhood as little children. Come to me as little children, because if you don't come to me as a little child, you're going to miss it. You're not going to see the kingdom. The kingdom is everywhere present, but you're not going to see it, because it requires those childlike qualities of curiosity. So much of the curiosity of childhood, I think, is stifled when we convince our children that there's only one answer, and it's the answer that the authority wants, whether it be the teacher in school, or whether it be the teacher in Sunday school, or the pastor of the church, or the boss, whoever's asking the question. So children learn over time. Well, there's one answer that they want, and as soon as I learn that one answer, I can pass the test, and there's no need to go any further. No curiosity. No asking why. No digging deeper. A few years ago, when we first moved here, I took some courses at the local technical college. I was trying to get into their video production curriculum, and never did. They didn't have room. But I took the other courses that were part of the degree program, And quite frequently the instructors would put up their PowerPoint charts, and there would be words on the chart that were bolded and underlined. And the teachers would say, pay particular attention to those bolded and underlined words. Wink, wink, nod, nod. They may be on the test. And very quickly the students learned, if they get a copy of the charts, if the teacher handed them out, or if they were online, or if they just took notes, the only thing that you needed to pay attention to was the bolded and underlined, because that's what was going to be on the test. So all they had to do is go back to the textbook and find the bolded or underlined words, read a little bit about them, and they could pass the test. And as soon as they passed the test, they could move on to the next semester. To me, that wasn't learning. That was memorizing something long enough to pass a test. That's what that was. There was no real curiosity there. There was no challenging or questioning the information that was given to say, well, is this the only way? Is this the best way? What other ways might there be? What other opinions are there? How would we go about evaluating opinions? None of that. None of that was there. It was simply memorize facts and data, put them down on a test, and move along, move along. So as children, we want to know, and we want to know what we want to know, and we want to dig it until we wear everybody out with our questions. And I think the most important question, the most important thing to be curious about is our spiritual nature. Nothing is more important. As I said, everything else is turning to dust. The houses we live in, the buildings we go to work in, the cemeteries that our ancestors are buried in, everything is turning to dust. But what's not turning to dust is our spirit, our soul, because that is a very part of the expression of the divine. And knowing more about that, and every minute of every day exploring that, and doing it in a joyful manner, and doing it in a fun-filled manner. Think of how much more time we put into something when it's fun. I was thinking of Mark Twain this morning, and his piece about Tom Sawyer. Tom Sawyer was given the punishment to whitewash the fence. He did something, and Aunt Polly told him he had to whitewash the fence. And he didn't whitewash the fence. He got other kids to do it by convincing them that it was a really fun thing to do. So the one thing that he didn't want to do was work, and he got the other kids to do it by convincing them that work was fun. How much more time would we put into something that was fun? That which has put us here has given us the appetites, the desires that lead us to do the things that are good for our growth, to know more about it, to ask why, to be curious, not to be like Forrest Gump, but to be curious. Who am I? Why am I here? Where am I going? And to do it in a loving manner, to do it in a joyful manner, to do it in a playful manner, to do it in a creative manner. What do you like to create? Do you like to paint? Do you like to write? Do you like to sing? Do you like to play the piano? What do you do to be creative? Can you use this time as our society goes through a tremendous shift? Can you use this time to go in and find your creativity and let it unlock your joyfulness? Let it unlock your playfulness. Let it unlock your curiosity. Then we can come to the presence of the divine as the little children. As the little children. So I invite you then, as we have this time to spend together, I invite you then to kind of consider, what is the most important thing in this life? And is it discovering more of our spiritual nature? Is it experiencing more of the presence and the activity that is already here and already around us? And if we were little children, this was so neat. When we were teaching problem solving workshops, when we would teach the problem solving skills, and then we would give the engineers a real problem to work on. We would call them together because they were the ones who had the skill set required to solve some problem. And we would call them together, and we would ask them to solve the problem, and they would. And then we would take them through a training session on problem solving, giving them some different skills. And one of the things we would do is ask them, if you told your 5-year-old at home about this problem, what kind of a solution do you think they would come up with? And what we found is when we got these, now these were educated people. They had master's degrees and PhDs and sometimes multiple PhDs. They were patent holders in the technology that we were working with. But when we got them to go back and to look at something as a child might look at it, they came up with better answers. Because usually what happened is the first answer that they gave us, we had already tried and implemented and failed. And we would tell them that, yeah, well, a group of very bright people just like you came up with that same answer 5 years ago and it didn't work. So now let's find a different way. Let's find a different way. Can we give ourselves permission to run up to the presence of the divine in this world as a little child might? To want to crawl up on the very lap of the divine, to be playful, to be joyful, to recognize the trust that the one who sent us has not abandoned us and is still here with us. But in order to see and to feel and to experience, we must let go of all of the structure that has been imposed upon us and go back to it as we would as a child. Divine love is here. Divine love is now. It has created us out of itself. It has given us a desire to know it, and it is calling us to itself. I invite you this week, answer that call in a playful manner, in a joyful manner, in a curious manner, in a creative manner. Think of the little ones getting off the bus, and they're all carrying their pieces of paper, with the things that they drew at school today. And they can't wait to come home and show mommy and daddy what they drew and put it up on the refrigerator for me so everybody can see it, If you were to run into the arms of divine love and show it what you made for it, out of your joy, out of your creativity, out of being in the moment, out of your curiosity, what would it be? You are the very love of the divine expressing itself here and now. Human beings have made things more difficult than they need to be and imposed all kinds of rules and regulations and structures and value systems on us that have taken us away from what is truly important in life. Now we have a time to re-examine those value systems. Now we have a time to re-engage with that which is really important, our spiritual growth. Let's have fun. Let's have adventure. Let's discover the presence of God in us, as us, and through us, in each other, and in all things. And so it is.